Welcome to the Nebraska Prep Zone Report, a podcast from the World-Herald. We are sponsored today by MD West One, Nebraska's most advanced sports medicine, orthopedics, neurosurgery, and spine care, covering Greater Omaha for over 70 years. I'm your host on this rainy morning, Jake Anderson, and joining me as always is Mike Sautter. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm good. I am very good.
All right.
Very good.
Well, we got a few news and notes to discuss today before we preview this week's games, and I figured we'd lead off with Creighton Prep in quarantine.
Yeah, kind of stinks for them, and they were supposed to play Bellevue West this week, and now Bellevue West is without an opponent for the first 3 weeks, and really could play 8-9 games, something like that, if everything holds, even into the playoffs. So really interesting, I guess, to see, Prep quarantining for as long as they did. They had a player that was, started quarantine last Monday, so he did not play on Friday night. So Papillion didn't have to get quarantined or anything like that. He was out kind of a week, and then, obviously contact with teammates and locker rooms and stuff like that is a big issue. So, Prep decided to just give it the full 2 weeks, and I think they'll likely play next week. They said the 15th. So, I don't know if they'll be able to get a couple days of practice in before a game. But
was there any worry for the team that they played before Monday, West Side? It was that Thursday game, so about 4 or 5 days before. But was there any worry for prior contact there?
No, not that I'm aware of at all. No.
Okay. Well, it sounds like they were able to catch it early enough, and now it just creates a wacky situation for Bellevue West. But that's kind of what we expected going into this season. Bellevue West did try and schedule a game against a few Iowa teams, but weren't able to. So for the second time in the first 3 weeks, they won't have a game.
Right. They had, it was Southeast Polk would have been the game that they really tried to get that game done, and that would have been fun because both teams have some high-level players on it, and both teams are really good and ranked highly in Iowa and Nebraska, and that would have been fun. But Southeast Polk decided to just play in Iowa, stay in Iowa, and not travel over here. It would have been on Saturday afternoon. The game would have been, and which would have been neat because that's different, and it likely would have been in Council Bluffs, either at Lewis Central or Wickersham Stadium.
And with the amount of prospects that both teams have, it would have been a decent preview for the next level.
Yeah, it would have been a lot of fun. I mean, that's one where you just write a story on who has what offers, and normally we don't do that kind of stuff, but that would have been really neat to kind of see.
And speaking of prospects with offers in Bellevue West, wide receiver freshman who you've talked about before, Davon Hall, was offered by Iowa on Tuesday, and it's believed that that's the first Nebraska high school freshman for football to receive an offer.
Yeah, it is the first known freshman to receive an offer, or he's the earliest football offer. There was Preston Murphy, Chucky Hepburn, Hunter Salas in basketball recently. And when I say known, I mean, we didn't track these things 25 years ago, right? So in the last, I guess this century or the 2000s, he would be the earliest. Before that was Cam Jurgens, I believe. And Cam was a little bit later after his freshman year. So I mean, the kid is special. Like he's a kind of a phenom, and that's what happens with kids like that. So, he's 6'2", 175 now. He started out at 165 in June before he started working out with the varsity team, and obviously was super excited to get that offer. And as I think people know, coaches can't call him; he has to call them. And so he called Iowa's wide receiver coach, Kelvin Copeland, and Coach Copeland gave him the news. And he said there was a lot of jumping up and down and excitement, and it's good for him. And I think he's a kid that can handle the pressure just fine. Starting as a wide receiver in Bellevue West offense as a freshman that means you're kind of a special guy, because they got enough players to fill, a fourth wide receiver or whatever. Now, I feel pretty confident in saying that Nebraska or the state has never had 4 wide receivers with power conference offers. And that's what Bellevue West has right now. So Luke Johansson was the guy that started at quarterback for them. He transferred from Bellevue East. And he's going to put up a lot of numbers as a quarterback throwing to those guys if they get a lot of games in. That's the thing is, how do you handle season records and stuff? That's something that some of these kids are going to likely miss out on just because you're not going to be able to play games, or they don't have enough games. So it'll be exciting to see kind of how Hall develops going forward, if he keeps on putting weight and those sort of things.
And it's another, we mentioned it last week, but it's another Iowa Bellevue West connection. Is that something that Mike Huffman talked, that he's kind of consistently hearing from Iowa coaches, or is there something about the program that Iowa likes?
Well, I think it more has to do with Keegan Johnson committing, and Keegan committed to Iowa, and I think that's kind of the reason. Keegan likely probably said, hey, here's this freshman you need to take a look at, and I'm sure Huffman did too. And Davon told me that Iowa has been told him that they've been following him for months now, and have watched a bunch of film of practices and 7-on-7 stuff and all that, and like the development, or like what they've seen so far. So that's kind of why I guess they offered when they did, and being the first to do it is something that kids think about at times, not all the time. But he's also got to stay healthy and all of those things in order to reach his full kind of potential. He did say that Iowa is the only school that has contacted him. He hasn't heard from anyone else. No DMs on Twitter, nothing like that. No phone calls with coaches. There hasn't been any of that. So Iowa's the only one right now that has reached out to him, which, he's a freshman. So he's got time.
Long way to go. And speaking of a long way to go, OPS is going to play fall sports in spring? That feels like a long way to go. I guess I look at it a couple different things. The plan, or the talked about kind of plan right now, is to start on March 1st with a 5-week fall season in the spring. Each just football-wise, each football team would play 2 games, so they'd practice for 3 weeks leading up to the 2 games. And like Central would play Burke and North. But there's a lot of holes you could punch in that plan. One is they would have to get NSAA approval, or a change of the NSAA bylaws to allow kids to play multiple sports in a season. Right now, Nebraska is a state that doesn't allow that. Also, just thinking logistically here. So Omaha South has a really good soccer team. So does Omaha Bryan.
So who gets the practice time on the turf field right after school? Is that the football team or the soccer team? Or do they rotate days? Like, who's the team that's going to practice at 7:00 at night to start their practice under the light?
Who's the team that's going to start practicing at 6 a.m. before school?
Right. Like, what does that look? What do those logistics look like? Here's another thing, and I just take Central for example. So Omaha Central is really good at basketball normally, right? So what happens in mid-March? 2 weeks into this practice, fall sports practice in the spring. Well, the state boys basketball tournament is in mid-March. Omaha Central's head football coach is also their top assistant as a basketball coach. So how does he split his time? Likely it's not, feasible to split his time unless they find a way to practice after school. And Central is one of those schools that only has one full court, so they need to go and practice at middle schools and other places anyway. So, and then you throw fall sports on top of it. Also, a handful of assistant football coaches at Omaha Central are assistant boys basketball coaches, not just their head coach, Jay Landstrom. So how do you coach both sports at the same time? I mean, that part's not really that hard. But when you're getting ready for a state championship or state tournament, you likely want all hands on deck. Another one is Omaha Norris boys basketball coach. His head boys basketball coach is an assistant football coach. How do you do that? Like, you have those things. And another kind of thing that I thought of is when it comes to how do you do a cross country and a track season at the same time? The training is two totally different things, totally opposite things, because cross country is a 5K or 3.1 miles. And you're putting a lot of miles on your body to train for that. Well, track is a distance runner, and track is a 2 mile or a 1600, or sometimes they run the 800 or 4x8, and sometimes maybe even the 400. So that's a whole different set of training. Well, if you have a cross country meet where you run 3.1 miles on a Tuesday, and it's Thursday, Friday, or Saturday when a track meet happens, and that same athlete normally is your best 2 miler or 3,200 and your best 1,600 runner, and maybe runs an 800, how does the body recover in a day or two after? We're talking about high school athletes here, not Olympians, that can likely do that. So those are some of the concerns and things that just I don't think maybe were fleshed out before this plan kind of was in place. And there's still time for that plan to those things to get fleshed out. But those are kind of just off the top of my head, the first thing I thought of were those things. How does this happen? How does this make sense to do, multiple sports? And one, the NSAA board is going to have to likely approve a bylaw in order for this to happen, or pass a new bylaw or an adjustment to the bylaws, which I don't know if they're going to be down for that. And
even if they do pass it, you're likely asking a bunch of volleyball, football players to decide between track or volleyball. And the other thing that I thought of while you're talking is, okay, what about golf? You're going to have a bunch of boys and girls golf teams at the same time trying to split time on courses? Right.
That doesn't make a lot of sense with the people. And I mean, the track and football thing, that can be, if you're a lineman and you're a thrower in track, that can be done. That's not as hard, right? Or a high jumper and a wide receiver. I mean, you probably likely don't need to practice as much. But again, you're training for two separate things. It's not like kids don't do that in the summers, but it just feels like it would be a lot. Does Devin Jackson, who's a really good track athlete, does he, if the NSAA doesn't pass a bylaw, he's going to have to choose between playing a 5-week season and running track? Well, he's really, really good at track too, along with football. Likely a state championship contender in multiple events on the track. He's going to have to choose. Deshaun Woods is another guy that's a thrower that is, going to compete for a state championship as shot put, disc, stuff like that. What does he do? Does he decide, well, the 5-week thing isn't worth it? There's just so many kind of.
The other thing to me, that if we're talking about recovery time and we're worried about college athletes playing a shorter spring season, why aren't we worried about that for athletes in spring playing a 5-week football season or a 5-week volleyball season and then jumping right into summer weightlifting programs and 7-on-7 and volleyball camps and where's the why aren't we worried about where's the recovery time for them?
Softball, baseball. Like if let's say you're a really good baseball player and you're your school's best pitcher. How do you, and you're the starting quarterback or play football. Well, how does that work? Like, how do you play a baseball game in the afternoon and a football game at night? That's a lot of throws on a shoulder and different things like that. So, volleyball is a little different because they play just a ton of club, but that bumps into the spring. The spring is club volleyball season. And, I know a handful of club volleyball coaches, and they're not likely to back down to missing club volleyball for high school stuff in the spring when it's not necessarily generally their season. One way they could actually get it done, if the NSAA doesn't approve it, is just call it intramurals. But then again, you're not competing for anything but a city championship really anyway. I don't know. I just don't think – I don't anticipate the NSAA is going to make that change. I just don't.
And this isn't to poo-poo the idea at all because as you know and I know and everyone knows, there are a bunch of OPS athletes in all sports who are champing at the bit to play right now.
Yeah. And they're transferring and moving and all of that too. So, that stuff has happened. We kind of tried to warn people that it was going to happen if they didn't play fall sports. And, Sam Scott was at Omaha North. He's probably likely the best OPS senior football player. And he's now transferred to Omaha Scott so he could play football for his senior year. So Omaha North loses out, right? Or here's another question. Like, does a kid like that, like Sam maybe, or others that have transferred, do they get to go back to the school they were at and play in a spring again? Like, is that going to be allowed to happen?
Or if a junior jumps schools and plays in the fall with his new team, and then if he wants to jump back to his original team the next fall, jumping back and forth between schools.
There's a lot of those kind of questions. I do think there has been some talk about the juniors that have left. They come back for their senior year to their original school. That's been a conversation, but we'll see. I guess am I confident the plan will work? No. There's just too many kind of what ifs right now to get it done.
Yeah. And I think this is a good time to jump to this Friday's games or this week's games. Our first one, Battle of Millard, number 2 Millard South coming in 2-0 against number 5 Millard West 1-1.
That would be the Battle of Q Street is what they call that game. So Millard South Millard West. Millard South played a tough one against Elkhorn South. Threw the ball a little bit. Gage Stanger had a really nice game for Millard South. So did TJ Urbon on both sides of the ball. That'll be an interesting one because Millard West can Millard West impose their will running the ball? Both teams like to run it first. And which one does it better likely will win, or which defense kind of holds up. And, I hate transitive property stuff like, oh, we beat this team, so that means they're going to beat this team. But, you look, Millard South beat Elkhorn South beat Millard West. Both games were really close. So I wouldn't be shocked if this one's another close game too. And really Millard South it feels like they're going to, have to play some close games like that if they're not getting turnovers. And really, if you're playing close games, the margin for error is pretty slim. So should be a nice game. James Conway is going to have a big game. Reading and reacting to TJ Urbon, that little matchup within the game would be really good. Conway's the linebacker for Millard West, and TJ's a quarterback. And he likes to run the ball a lot. So,
what will the key for the Patriots be to stop Millard West?
Just play sound. I think, their defense is really good. They got a bunch of athletes. I think if they just kind of do what they do, be fine. And Tate Hendricks is a nice player. They had a good game on Friday night for Millard South too. And Millard South has more athletes on the back end of their defense. They match up really well. Just going to be a matter of, can they stop the run? And Millard West, likes to run the ball. That's kind of their priority. So, it should be interesting to follow along with. I won't be there, but it should be an interesting follow to see how that game plays out.
Our next one, number 8 Grand Island 1-0 against number 6 Lincoln Southeast 2-0. Battle undefeated. It's probably good first true test for both teams here.
Yeah, Grand Island missed their first game because of quarantine stuff. Should be a nice game. You'd expect Southeast to maybe come out with a win. They kind of reloaded a little bit. McGinnis Schneider's playing quarterback full time now, and kind of made an adjustment. He was playing some defense and was kind of the backup quarterback and played a little bit of quarterback last year for Southeast. There's another Gifford along the way that is playing pretty well for Southeast right now, and they got a nice line. They got good athletes. Both teams are really coached well. Coach Tomlin does a fantastic job at Grand Island. It's going to be the tougher team's going to win. I mean, that's normally in football, but, Coach Tomlin just knowing the way that he coaches and whoever's a tougher team's going to win. And it'll be, Frankel is going to have a good game for Grand Island. So there's a lot of young talent on kind of both teams too, that we'll see, in a big time kind of game like that against a tough opponent who's ready for that right now. So it'd be a lot better if, student sections and fans and stuff showed up. It'd be a little different. The environment matters more that way. But it should be a decent game. I would say probably a close game, and Southeast is favored, or the higher rated team, and returns a little bit more, so you would expect them to come out with the win, but it wouldn't shock me if Grand Island did either.
And then jumping to Class B, we have number 6 Bennington against number 2 Norris. Both teams coming in at 2-0. Norris moving up in the ratings with Scott dropping to Waverly. That was a good battle last week. And this one, kind of the one to highlight, is the name everyone knows, James Carney, tight end. You kind of featured him this week. He's committed to Miami of Ohio, but he's still hearing from a few schools.
Yeah, Boise State has offered, Wyoming offered, hearing from K-State, Nebraska, Iowa a little bit too. Big, strong kid with some speed. He fits kind of the prototypical tight end that people are looking for right now. He wants a power conference offer. Boise State's about as close as, they're basically a power conference school. If you look at it, they haven't lost a game. They haven't had a losing record since 1997. And always ranked in the top 25 in that. But, it'll be that one, that recruitment will be kind of neat to see. I did ask him if Nebraska were to offer him, is 20 miles down the road. If Nebraska were to offer him, would he just jump at it? And he said he'd likely have to think about it. Nebraska already has 2 tight ends committed in Thomas Fedoni and AJ Rollins. So it's something I think he's hoping for. But again, do you want to be the third, 3 tight ends in a class? In a recruiting class, it's kind of difficult. K-State's done a really nice job recruiting him, and seemed pretty excited about K-State when I talked to him. So that'll be interesting. A guy for Bennington, Tyler LeClaire, has had a fantastic start to the season. He's a phenomenal athlete and really tough kid. So that game, we'll see. Bennington lost a lot quarterback in that last year and from last year. So we'll see if Bennington can kind of go on the road and handle what is likely a difficult environment, obviously a road test, and a really good Norris team that has, not just Carney, but they got a bunch of other guys too. So Cooper Hausman's a really athletic quarterback for them. And I just don't, we'll see if Bennington wins that game, they're definitely in the conversation and for real. So that one will be kind of obviously interesting to see how it plays out.
Our last matchup here is Class C, and again, another early season true test for both teams. Number 9 St. Paul 1-1 at number 2 Kearney Catholic 2-0. Games early for Kearney Catholic haven't been close. They've outscored their first 2 opponents 100-6, which is both a note on them and probably their opponents. St. Paul is a good team and should give them a test.
Yeah, St. Paul likes to run the ball, and Kearney Catholic likes to throw it. So obviously with Heinrich Harburg is kind of obviously the star, and he's had a pretty fantastic start to the season, I would say. It'll battle of wills, 2 different teams, 2 different styles of teams, I guess I should say. So, St. Paul is 1-1. They lost, I believe, last week. I'm looking it up right now. No, they beat Broken Bow and lost to Pierce in week 1. So, and Pierce is always a really good team. So that's not super, I guess, surprising would be the words there. But we'll see. Like, weather could be a factor if it's raining, if it's not raining, if it's cold or windy. You got to be able to run the ball. If St. Paul can run the ball, they might be fine. Eli Larson is a really, really good senior running back for St. Paul. But I guess you do have Heinrich Harburg.
Is this the week that we could see more of Harburg running?
Right.
He's been doing quite a bit to open the year.
I was just going to say that. This is likely where you'll see him pull it down with his legs and take off a little bit and show his athleticism and not just his, strong throwing arm. So could be a tough one. We'll, obviously whoever can control the game with what they want to do offensively, if St. Paul can run the ball and Kearney Catholic can throw it, then, it's going to be hard for St. Paul to maybe keep up. But Larson is a really good back, and he's a guy that people kind of need to, I think, talk about a little bit more.
And those are our games to watch this week. Mike Sautter will be headed to an 8-man game on Friday night. That's the Pinnacle Bank game of the week, Howells Dodge in Cross County. So keep an eye out for updates on that one, and keep an eye out for updates from our high school football coverage on any Prep Zone. Until next time, thanks for listening.
As the official team doctors for high school and college teams across Greater Omaha, MD West One Sports Med Doctors can get you back into the game, stronger than ever. Meet the Sports Med team at mdwest1.com or call 402-390-4111.